Is the US-Canada trade war spiraling out of control? The world is watching as trade tensions between the United States and Canada reach a boiling point. The latest development? A shocking 25% tariff imposed by President Trump, sending ripples across the global economic landscape. But this isn't just about numbers. It's about livelihoods, industries, and the very foundation of US-Canada trade relations. How did we get here? What does this mean for businesses, consumers, and economies on both sides of the border? And most importantly, can this escalating trade war be stopped before it does irreversible damage? The shockwave of Trump's 25% tariff, the announcement of a 25% tariff on steel, aluminum, and auto parts landed like a thunderclap, disrupting North America's tightly woven economic fabric. For US automakers, the impact was immediate and painful. Manufacturing costs surged, forcing companies into a tough decision: absorb the financial hit or pass the costs on to consumers. The latter meant higher car prices, a scenario that risked slowing down an already volatile market. The effects didn't stop at the factory floor. A sharp rise in production expenses threatened profit margins, leaving the industry scrambling to adjust. The timing couldn't have been worse. Automakers were already navigating supply chain issues and adapting to shifts in consumer demand. This tariff wasn't just a policy shift, it was a game changer, altering the financial and operational landscape of the industry overnight. North of the border, Canadian exporters braced for impact. Steel mills and auto parts manufacturers, long reliant on the US market, found themselves at a crossroads. These new tariffs didn't just jeopardize trade relationships, they made competition with American suppliers nearly impossible. Decades-long business partnerships were suddenly on the verge of collapse, sending shockwaves through local economies and job markets. And the domino effect continued. Small businesses that depended on imported materials struggled to stay afloat. Many faced the brutal reality of shrinking operations or raising prices, both risky moves in an already uncertain economic climate. Meanwhile, consumers bore the brunt of rising costs, with everything from vehicles to canned goods becoming more expensive. For companies accustomed to the efficiency of free trade, this tariff introduced chaos. Supply chains designed for seamless cross-border movement were thrown into disarray, leading to delays, increased costs, and logistical nightmares. The result? A fundamental reassessment of sourcing strategies, production locations, and long-term trade partnerships. Beyond economics, a bold political statement. This wasn't just an economic policy, it was a political statement. The Trump administration framed the tariffs as a necessary move to protect American industries and jobs. Supporters saw it as a firm stand against trade imbalances, believing it would help revitalize domestic manufacturing. Critics, however, viewed it as a risky gamble, one that put global alliances and economic stability on the line for short-term political gain. Protectionism, they argued, could backfire, leading to retaliatory measures that would hurt American businesses just as much as their international counterparts. The message was clear. This wasn't just about economics. It was a test of political will, a move that challenged allies, disrupted supply chains, and reshaped trade dynamics across North America. But if the United States thought Canada would simply accept this new reality, they were in for a surprise. Canada strikes back, flexing its energy muscle. Canada didn't take this sitting down. As one of the world's largest energy producers, it held significant leverage in the global market, and it was ready to use it. Ottawa made it clear that if trade barriers were being raised, Canada was prepared to pivot its energy exports away from the US and toward new global partners. The response was swift. Canadian officials began exploring options to redirect oil and gas shipments to Europe and Asia, where demand remained strong. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sent a firm message: Canada values its relationship with the United States, but we will always stand up for Canadian interests. Energy is not just a resource, it's a critical component of our economic sovereignty. We are prepared to diversify our partnerships globally to ensure our industries remain strong and competitive. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson reinforced this stance, emphasizing that Canada's energy resources were in high demand worldwide. If traditional trade partners were unwilling to collaborate fairly, Canada was more than capable of finding new markets. This wasn't about retaliation, he argued. It was about ensuring Canadian resources were valued appropriately. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland drove the point home. Our energy sector employs thousands of Canadians, drives innovation, and sustains communities. We cannot and will not let our industries suffer due to unfair trade practices. The global response was immediate. European Union officials welcomed the possibility of increased energy cooperation with Canada, while Asian markets, including Japan and South Korea, expressed interest in securing long-term partnerships. Canada's energy flex wasn't just a response to US tariffs. It was a strategic move that positioned the country as a global energy powerhouse. The auto industry, the trade war's front line. If there was one industry feeling the brunt of this trade war, it was the auto sector. The tightly integrated supply chains of North America meant that any disruption had widespread consequences. For US car manufacturers reliant on Canadian auto parts, the tariffs created an immediate crisis. Production delays, rising costs, and logistical hurdles forced companies to reassess everything from sourcing materials to assembly locations. Some automakers were even forced to halt production lines, leading to significant financial losses. Meanwhile, in Canada, auto plants saw demand plummet. Retaliatory tariffs and shifting market dynamics created a ripple effect that hit smaller suppliers the hardest. With fewer orders coming in, many were forced to reduce operations or shut down entirely, sparking fears of widespread layoffs. The crisis extended beyond manufacturers. Dealerships faced declining inventories and rising prices, forcing potential buyers to rethink purchases. Logistics companies suffered from disrupted transport routes. Even steel producers supplying raw materials to the auto industry felt the sting. As thousands of jobs hung in the balance, the industry found itself at a crossroads. Could automakers adapt quickly enough to survive, or would the trade war leave lasting scars on one of the most vital sectors of the North American economy? Mexico's strategic pivot, a lesson in resilience. While the US and Canada clashed, Mexico took a different approach, one focused on adaptation and long-term strategy. Recognizing the risks of over-reliance on North American trade, Mexico accelerated efforts to diversify its economic partnerships. The country deepened ties with European and Asian markets, opening new avenues for exports and reducing dependence on its northern neighbors. Free trade agreements, targeted partnerships, and investment in new industries positioned Mexico as a resilient player in global trade. This wasn't just a defensive move, it was a blueprint for economic survival. While the US and Canada struggled with uncertainty, Mexico showcased how strategic foresight could turn potential vulnerabilities into opportunities. The road ahead. Can this trade war be stopped? As the dust settles, one question remains. Where do US-Canada trade relations go from here? The tariffs have already caused significant economic disruptions, and if retaliatory measures escalate, both countries risk long-term damage to key industries. Diplomatic efforts may hold the key. While tensions are high, both nations have strong incentives to find common ground. The question is whether political leaders are willing to prioritize economic stability over nationalist rhetoric. In the meantime, businesses, workers, and consumers are left navigating an uncertain future. The trade war has exposed the vulnerabilities of an interconnected economy, highlighting the risks of protectionism and the importance of global partnerships. One thing is certain, this battle is far from over. Whether it ends in compromise or continued conflict will shape the future of North American trade for years to come.